She gave her virginity to the dying billionaire, not knowing he'd survive and come for her. You're trembling. The words slid like a blade through the silence of the penthouse bedroom. Adrian King, the billionaire every magazine once called untouchable, leaned against velvet pillows, his body frail, but his eyes dark and unyielding. His voice was rough, cold, but alive with command. Amaya Brooks froze in place, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She was standing in a stranger's room, a dying man's room, about to give him the last thing she had left of herself. "Spare me your pity," Adrian rasped, studying her with unnerving precision. "I don't need a saint. I need honesty. Can you handle that?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. How had she ended up here, sold to a man who might not live to see another week? Hours earlier, the world had collapsed on her. At Midtown Medical Center, doctors surrounded his father's bed. Kenneth Brooks, once strong and steady, lay unconscious, his heart failing. The attending physician's tone was merciless. "We cannot proceed without a deposit." $100,000. Tonight the words knocked the breath from her lungs. She begged, pleaded, but the doctor was unmoved. And then, like a viper, her stepmother struck. Denise Brooks leaned close, her perfume sickeningly sweet. "There's a way," she hissed. "Adrian King. The billionaire in Buckhead. He's dying. One night with him, and your father lives." Amaya's body shook with fury and shame. "You want me to?" "I want you to save your father," Denise snapped, her eyes cold. "One night, no strings. Do this or watch him die." The deal was sealed when Jonah Price, Adrian's lawyer, pressed an envelope into her hands. His face betrayed nothing. Inside, NDA, a safe word, confirmation the funds will be wired, sign, and the money clears. Her signature felt like chains tightening around her wrists. Within hours, a black SUV carried her through Atlanta's neon streets, delivering her to Adrian King's glass tower. Now, back in that penthouse, the man himself regarded her with a mixture of weariness and iron will. He was pale, weakened by experimental treatments, yet his voice still commanded. His cold question hung between them, daring her to walk away. But she didn't. She couldn't. For her father's life, she stayed. The night passed in shadows. No love, no fairy tale. Just two broken people, trading what neither of them should have had to give. By dawn, it was over. Adrian had kept his word. The funds hit Amaya's account before she even stepped outside. That very hour, her father was wheeled into surgery, his fragile heartbeat given a second chance. Exhausted, Amaya sank into a chair in the hospital lobby, trying to breathe. A TV mounted above the waiting room blared breaking news. Her blood ran cold. Billionaire Adrian King near death after experimental treatment fails. Amaya's pulse thundered in her ears. The man who had just altered the course of her life might already be gone forever. The waiting room clock ticked into morning. Amaya Brooks sat in a stiff chair, her body heavy with exhaustion, her eyes locked on the operating room doors. Hours earlier, she had walked out of Adrian King's penthouse, broken and ashamed, and now the weight of that night pressed against her chest like an iron band. The sound of hurried footsteps snapped her out of her fog. A nurse appeared, her expression calm but firm. The surgery was a success. Your father pulled through relief, crashed over Amaya, hot tears spilling from her eyes. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Against all odds, her father would live. But even as she cried, Denise's shadow loomed. Her stepmother sauntered down the hall with a smirk, her heels clicking with confidence. "See? Worth it," she whispered coldly. "And don't worry about the money. I've already taken care of what I'm owed." Amaya's head snapped up. What do you mean? Denise's eyes glimmered with greed. Did you really think every dollar went to the hospital? I made sure I got a little cut for my trouble. Amaya's throat burned with anger. Her stepmother had sold her and skimmed the money that had bought her father's life. But before she could speak, her father stirred in recovery, his weak smile pulling her attention away. She couldn't fight Denise now. Not when he needed her calm. That night, Amaya forced herself back to work. Bills would still come, debts would still chase them, and Ken would need aftercare. She picked up an extra shift cleaning at King Holdings Tower, her mop sloshing across the marble floors of the 35th floor. Everywhere she went, whispers followed her. Did you hear? Adrian King is gone. They say the treatment failed. He'll never come back. Her stomach twisted. She knew better than anyone he hadn't been gone. She had seen him alive just hours ago, and yet the employees gossiped like his death was fact, spreading rumors through the sterile glass halls. She bent low over her mop, praying no one would notice her trembling hands. By the next morning, she met her best friend Tasha Reed at the corner salon before her shift. Tasha had always been the fearless one, bright braids piled on her head, sharp tongue ready for battle. The moment she saw Amaya's pale face, she frowned. Girl, something's wrong. Tell me. Amaya shook her head, swallowing hard. I can't. Not now. Tasha crossed her arms, unconvinced. Then promise me this. Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone. I'll fight with you, no matter what. Her words should have been comforting, but Amaya felt only dread. How could she ever tell her friend the truth? Later that evening, her world tilted. She had just finished wiping down a conference room when the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. And there he was, Adrian King, alive. He stepped out of the elevator, flanked by his lawyer Jonah, but his eyes scanned the room and landed directly on her. The air left her lungs. Her hands instinctively brushed the thin silver bracelet circling her wrist, the only piece of jewelry she had worn that night, and in that instant, she knew he recognized it. Amaya's body went cold. If Adrian was alive, if he remembered, then the night she thought had vanished into shadows might come crashing into daylight. For a moment, Amaya thought her heart had stopped. Adrian King, alive, whole, striding out of that elevator like he had never been on the edge of death. The billionaire's sharp eyes landed on her instantly, and they didn't waver. His gaze dropped to her wrist, where the thin silver bracelet glinted under the harsh lights. Recognition flickered in his expression. A muscle ticked in his jaw. And then, without a word, he turned on his heel. You! With me! His voice was rough but commanding. He didn't ask. He ordered. Amaya's breath hitched, but her feet betrayed her, carrying her into a glass-walled conference room. The door shut behind them, sealing her inside with the man whose life she had once bartered her soul for. Adrian folded his arms, leaning back against the table with a weariness he couldn't quite mask. His eyes, though, were piercing. That bracelet, he said, voice low. I've seen it before. The night I nearly died, the woman who came to me, she wore that same piece. You, Amaya, froze, every nerve screaming. You're mistaken, she whispered, shaking her head. But Adrian's gaze sharpened, cutting through her denial. Don't play games with me. Do you think I don't know what leverage looks like? You were there that night, and now you show up in my building, scrubbing my floors, as if fate didn't stitch this together on purpose. Tell me, what's your angle? Blackmail? A lawsuit? A press leak? Her stomach twisted. Shame flared in her cheeks, but fury soon followed. Do you really think I wanted this? She shot back, her voice trembling but firm. Do you think I sold myself to hurt you? My father was dying. I didn't want your money, Adrian. I wanted him to live." The words cut sharper than she expected, and for a second his expression flickered, pain, confusion, maybe even regret, but it hardened quickly. "You think excuses erase what happened? Secrets rot from the inside, Miss Brooks, and right now you're holding one that could bury us both." The glass door flew open before either of them could say another word. Jonah Price, Adrian's ever-calm lawyer, stepped inside, his phone pressed to his ear, his face ashen. "We have a problem," he said grimly. Adrian straightened immediately. "What kind?" Jonah lowered his voice, though his eyes darted toward Amaya. "Someone's preparing to leak it. The night. The rumors about your last request. It could hit the press within hours if we don't get ahead of it." Amaya's stomach dropped. She looked between them, panic sparking in her chest. If the world discovered what she had done, what Adrian had bought, it wouldn't just destroy her father's dignity, it would destroy her too. Adrian's jaw tightened, his gaze snapped back to her. "You're coming with me." Amaya blinked. "What? No, I have work. Not anymore." Adrian cut her off, his tone sharp as steel. "If you're connected to this leak, willingly or not, you're a target. And I don't leave loose ends. Security will escort you to my car. From now on, you stay where I can see you." The ride to Buckhead was silent except for the low hum of Adrian King's private SUV. Amaya sat pressed against the leather seat, her arms folded tight, her phone clutched in her hand. The anonymous text replayed in her mind like a drumbeat. "Your stepmother sold you. Check the transfer. And the receipt. Cold, undeniable proof." Denise hadn't just betrayed her. She had profited from her humiliation. But the weight of Adrian's presence beside her was just as suffocating. He stared out the tinted window, his jaw clenched, his posture a fragile mix of strength and sickness. Even alive, he looked like a man fighting for every breath. Finally, he broke the silence. "That bracelet." His voice was softer now, almost weary. "You wore it then. You wear it now. You knew I'd recognize it." Amaya turned sharply. "I didn't plan any of this. You think I wanted to cross paths with you again? To be dragged into your world?" Adrian's gaze flicked to her, hard and assessing. "The world already knows something. My enemies are circling. You showing up in my building isn't coincidence. It's ammunition." When the SUV pulled into his gated townhouse, Amaya's pulse spiked. Security guards ushered her inside, through a gleaming foyer of glass and steel. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and cedar. She was guided into his study, a room lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a massive oak desk that looked like it had survived wars. Adrian dismissed the guards with a wave. Only Jonah lingered, his expression grave. Adrian lowered himself into the leather chair, folding his hands together. "Let me be clear," he said, voice steady. "A leak about what happened between us would not just destroy me, it would destroy you. My board would demand my resignation. The press would devour your name. And your father, he'd be collateral damage." Amaya bristled. "So what? You're going to lock me up, threaten me until I play along." "Not lock you up," Adrian replied smoothly. "Protect you." Jonah slid a thick folder across the desk. "This is an agreement," he explained. "Temporary, clean. If signed, it binds both of you into a very specific narrative. A public engagement. You, Miss Brooks, will play the part of Adrian's fiancée. Zero intimacy clause. A hard-end date in writing. Appearances, interviews, carefully staged outings. The works. It shields you from scandal and shields him from hostile takeover attempts." Amaya's breath caught. "Engagement?" She shook her head violently. "Absolutely not. I'm not about to become your puppet." Before Adrian could answer, Amaya's phone buzzed again. She glanced down and froze. A video message. Her apartment hallway. two men in black hoodies pounding on her door, shouting threats. "Tell the girl she can't run forever. Her daddy owes more than he's worth." Her blood turned to ice. She pushed back from the desk. "My father—" Adrian's hand slammed down on the armrest. "Jonah, track that number. Now." But Amaya was already bolting for the door. "I have to go!" Adrian's voice rang out behind her, sharp and commanding. "Miss Brooks, wait!" By the time she reached her father's apartment in the old Fourth Ward, the hallway was empty, but the doorframe bore fresh cracks where fists had pounded. Her father sat inside, shaken, clutching his chest. Denise fluttered around him, wringing her hands like she was the grieving widow already. "Debt collectors," Ken whispered hoarsely. "They said if the hospital money dries up, I'm finished." Amaya sank to her knees beside him, heart aching, and then her phone chimed again. A new notification from the hospital portal, account flagged, payment on hold due to suspected fraud. Her vision blurred. "No, no, no!" She scrolled in disbelief. The life-saving funds had been frozen. She didn't need to ask who was behind it. In Adrian's world, enemies played dirty. Someone had sabotaged her father's care, and she knew instinctively it traced back to Victor Sloan, the COO clawing for Adrian's empire. Back at the townhouse that night, Amaya's fury boiled over. "They froze his care!" she shouted, slamming her phone onto Adrian's desk. "My father could die because of you!" Adrian rose slowly, bracing a hand against the chair for balance. "Because of me? Or because someone wants me gone badly enough to destroy anyone connected to me?" She hated that he was right. Jonah leaned forward, voice calm but insistent. "The fraud hold was engineered. We traced the hospital admin's login, Victor Sloan's network. If you stay unprotected, they'll crush you to get to him. But if you sign this agreement—" He tapped the folder again. "You both survive." Amaya's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. A fake engagement, public appearances, photographed smiles, pretend affection. She would become a prop, a pawn in Adrian King's war. But the alternative was her father's death. Her pen scratched across the signature line before she could talk herself out of it. Adrian's eyes lingered on her, unreadable. "You'll have protection." "My protection. From this moment, you're no longer invisible, Amaya Brooks. You're mine, at least in the eyes of the world." Her throat tightened, heat flooding her cheeks. She wanted to scream that she wasn't his, that this was a contract, not a vow, but the ink was already dry. Later, as the contract copies were filed away, Jonah walked Amaya to the door. His voice was low, but every word carried weight. "You think you've saved yourself," he murmured, "but you've stepped into a firestorm." Adrian's enemies don't fight fair, and the board, they're like wolves. One wrong move, one false smile, and they'll gut him, and you along with him. Amaya's chest tightened. "So what are you saying? That I've just made the worst mistake of my life?" Jonah's gaze softened, almost pitying. "I'm saying, be careful. You're playing a role now, and in this theater, one slip of truth can cost you everything." Back inside, Adrian scrolled his phone, jaw tightening. A breaking push alert lit up the screen. Adrian King's mystery fiancé to debut at Midtown Arts Gala tonight. The world already knew. The mirror was almost unrecognizable. Amaya Brooks stood frozen in the dressing suite, her reflection transformed into someone who looked like she belonged in the glittering world she had been dragged into. Her hair had been pressed into a glossy wave that tumbled over one shoulder, and a navy gown shimmered like water each time she moved. The diamond necklace loaned from Adrian's collection glowed at her throat, heavy with expectation. Tasha squealed, spinning around her with a makeup brush in hand. "Girl, look at you. You look like a queen. Forget these rich folks. You're about to shut down the room." Amaya's stomach twisted. She didn't feel like a queen. She felt like an imposter standing on a cliff's edge, ready to fall. Tonight she would be introduced to the world not as Amaya Brooks, daughter of a construction foreman, but as Adrian King's fiancée, a role written in ink but built on lies. Behind her, the door opened. Adrian stepped in, dark suit cut perfectly to his frame, his tie a sharp line of power. His gaze lingered on her just a moment too long before he cleared his throat. "The car's waiting." The way he looked at her, the faint surprise, the silent admiration, stirred something she quickly pushed down. This wasn't real. None of this was. The Midtown Arts Gala glittered like a fairy tale, but Amaya felt every eye slice into her as she stepped onto the red carpet beside Adrian. Cameras exploded with light. Questions flew like arrows. "Mr. King! Who is she? Is the engagement true? How did you meet?" Adrian's hand pressed lightly to her back, guiding her forward. His expression was unreadable, as if he'd worn masks his entire life. Amaya followed his lead, though her knees trembled beneath the weight of so many stares. And then she saw her. Evelyn Harper. The woman was a vision of polished malice, draped in scarlet silk, her smile as sharp as glass. She moved toward them like a predator scenting prey. "Adrian." Her voice oozed sweetness, but her eyes flicked over Amaya with thinly veiled disdain. "I didn't realize you'd already replaced me." Heat flushed Amaya's cheeks. She opened her mouth, but Adrian beat her to it, his tone cool and final. "Evelyn, this is my fiancée, Amaya Brooks." Evelyn's smile didn't falter, but her gaze sharpened, cutting straight through Amaya as though daring her to falter. "Charming." Inside, the gala hummed with money and power. Donors sipped champagne under chandeliers. Art collectors whispered about million-dollar bids, and gossip swirled like smoke. Amaya tried to remember Tasha's crash course. Smile, nod, don't drink too fast, and if someone insults you, never let them see you flinch. It didn't take long for the venom to strike. "So," a sleek woman with pearls said, circling Amaya with a smile too tight to be genuine, "where exactly did Adrian find you? Modeling, charity work, or somewhere less prestigious?" Laughter rippled around the group. Amaya felt her throat burn. Every instinct told her to shrink, but instead she lifted her chin. "He found me cleaning his building," she said, her voice steady. "Turns out, love doesn't care about resumes." A hush fell over the group, the laughter sputtering. Adrian's head turned sharply toward her, and though his expression didn't change, something flickered in his eyes. Pride, maybe even admiration. The pearl-clad woman sputtered, "How quaint!" but the others shifted, uneasy, no longer laughing so freely. Unseen by Amaya, a man lingered near the edge of the room. Victor Sloane's fixer, a shadow in an expensive suit. He slipped a tiny device beneath a tablecloth, the red light of a hidden microphone blinking once before vanishing into silence. Nearby, Evelyn leaned close to a board member, her voice low but dripping with sugar. "It's only a matter of time before someone uncovers the truth." Deathbed mistress turned fiancé? Tell me, does that sound like love or leverage? Hours passed, and Amaya did her best to survive the swirl of conversation, champagne, and scrutiny. She stumbled once, but Adrian's hand steadied her, firm at her waist, his lips brushing close to her ear. "Breathe. They feed on weakness. Don't give it to them." For a dangerous second, his words felt less like strategy and more like protection. But the illusion shattered when a flashbulb went off, brighter than the rest. A paparazzo leaned over the velvet rope, snapping furiously. Amaya instinctively turned her face away, but the camera caught the worst possible angle. Adrian's hand still on her waist, her lips parted as if about to kiss him, his gaze fixed entirely on her. "Got it!" the man shouted, grinning as security dragged him back. Amaya's stomach plummeted. She knew instantly how that picture would look, how it would feed the whispers, how it would paint her not as a reluctant stand-in, but as Adrian King's scandalous secret. By midnight, the gala wound down, but the storm had only begun. Amaya's phone buzzed in her clutch as they left the venue. She pulled it out and felt the blood drain from her face. On the screen, a grainy video clip was already going viral. Her, entering Adrian's penthouse weeks earlier. A shadowed figure beside him. Headline banners screamed across social feeds. "Adrian King's deathbed mistress revealed?" The comments scrolled endlessly, vicious and gleeful. "Gold digger." She waited for him to die, but he didn't. King Holding CEO bought himself a toy. Amaya's throat tightened, her chest heaving. She could barely hear the cameras flashing as they hurried into the waiting car. Adrian took the phone from her trembling hands, his jaw a hard line. His knuckles whitened around the device, but his voice stayed level. "They want a scandal. Then we'll give them something they can't tear apart." Amaya turned toward him, panic rising. "What do you mean?" But he didn't answer. The car pulled away, the city lights flickering across his face, and Amaya realized the truth. Whatever Adrian King had planned, it would drag her deeper into this firestorm than she had ever imagined. The fallout struck like a tidal wave. By dawn, Amaya's face was everywhere. Grainy stills of her stepping into Adrian King's penthouse, her eyes wide, her clothes plain and ordinary, plastered across gossip sites with bold, merciless captions. "Deathbed mistress? King's final sin before the grave." By the time she reached Adrian's townhouse, a small crowd had gathered outside the gates, journalists, paparazzi, and gawkers waving cell phones. Some shouted her name, some spat cruel words. "Gold digger, home wrecker, how much did he pay you?" Amaya clutched her clutch tighter, heart hammering. Her father was still recovering in the hospital, and if this chaos reached him, it could finish the job his failing heart had already started. Adrian stepped out of the black SUV at her side. The shouts rose higher, flashbulbs igniting like firecrackers. For a moment, Amaya felt utterly exposed, like prey in a pit of wolves. And then Adrian reached for her hand. His palm was warm, steady, his grip firm as steel. He laced his fingers with hers, lifted their joined hands for the cameras, and spoke in a voice that cut through the din like a blade. "My fiancé deserves respect." The crowd faltered, stunned by the boldness. Paparazzi snapped even harder, but the tide had shifted. He wasn't hiding her. He was claiming her. Amaya's breath hitched, her heart slamming against her ribs. She reminded herself it was an act, a contract. Yet in that moment, the way he shielded her, the way his words rang with unshakable conviction, felt dangerously real. But safety was fleeting. That afternoon, Amaya raced back to her father's apartment in Old Fourth Ward after Denise's frantic call. Her blood turned cold when she found two burly men in leather jackets loitering in the hallway, their eyes hard and predatory. "Where's the money, girl?" one of them sneered, blocking her path. "Your daddy's debt don't vanish just because some rich man buys you a dress." Her father's weak voice called from inside the apartment. "Amaya, don't," before coughing fitfully. Adrenaline roared in her ears. "Leave him alone," she snapped, trying to push past, but the men closed in, their shadows swallowing the hallway. Before they could move closer, headlights blazed through the broken blinds. Adrian's convoy pulled up to the curb outside, black SUVs screeching to a stop. His security team swarmed the hallway, weapons holstered but authority blazing. And then Adrian himself appeared, immaculate suit untouched by the chaos. eyes blazing with fury. "Step away from her," he commanded, voice as cold as a winter blade. The thugs hesitated, weighing the cost of defying him. Jonah's voice cut sharp as he held his phone up. "A PD's already on the line. Walk now, or you'll be in cuffs before the hour's out." The men backed off reluctantly, spitting curses as they retreated down the stairs. Amaya's knees threatened to give way, but Adrian caught her by the elbow, steadying her as though she were fragile glass. For a second, their faces were close, his dark eyes locking onto hers with something more than anger, something protective, raw, almost tender. "You don't walk into fire alone," he murmured. "Not anymore." Her heart stuttered. She opened her mouth to reply, but a nurse rushed from the bedroom to announce her father was in distress again. The moment shattered. Adrian moved immediately, barking orders, personally driving Ken in the back of his own car to Midtown Medical, while Jonah coordinated with the hospital staff. The corridors of Midtown Medical blurred as Amaya sprinted beside the gurney, Adrian's tall frame never once faltering. He wasn't just a billionaire CEO anymore. He was a man fighting for her father's survival as fiercely as she was. They reached the room, alarms blaring, nurses swarming. Amaya clutched the doorframe, tears streaming, while Adrian stood solid at her back, a pillar of calm amid the storm. Minutes stretched like hours until the monitor steadied and the team stabilized her father's fragile rhythm. The nurse gave a weary nod. "He's stable, but he needs rest." No more shocks tonight. Amaya sagged with relief, her chest trembling. When she turned, Adrian was still there, always there. Their eyes locked, and for one reckless second, the air between them changed. His hand lifted, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. The world seemed to fall silent except for the thunder of her own heart. Her lips parted, his gaze dropped toward them, and the distance shrank to a breath. But then, like a cruel reminder of reality, Amaya pulled back. The contract, the rules, zero intimacy clause. She turned away, shame flooding her cheeks. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence screamed with everything unspoken. The following morning, exhaustion dragged at Amaya's body as she slumped into the plastic chair by her father's bed. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back into the nightmare that never seemed to end. A new notification blinked on the screen. Bank statement, incoming transfer. Amount, $50,000. Origin, VS Holdings, LLC. Amaya stared, horror dawning. Denise's name was tied to the account. Her stepmother had taken money, dirty money, from someone inside Adrian's empire. Someone who wanted this entire scandal to explode. Her hands shook as she clutched the phone, the truth tightening around her throat. Whoever VS Holdings was, they weren't finished with her. And Denise, her own blood, was tangled right in the middle of it. The silence in the Brooks apartment was thick enough to choke on. Amaya stood frozen in the doorway, her phone clenched in her hand, the bank statement still glowing across the screen. $50,000. Paid from VS Holdings. Deposited directly into Denise's account. Her stepmother's voice floated from the kitchen, humming along to some old R&B track, as if her world weren't balanced on the edge of disaster. Amaya's blood boiled. She stormed in, slamming the phone onto the counter so hard Denise nearly dropped the knife she was using to slice peaches. "What is this?" Amaya demanded, her voice trembling with fury. Denise blinked, feigning innocence. "What's what?" "Don't play with me," Amaya shouted, her voice cracking. "This transfer, from VS Holdings, $50,000. It came the same day Dad's surgery was paid for. You sold me out, and then you took a cut." The mask slipped instantly. Denise's lips curled into something between guilt and defiance. "So what if I did?" she snapped. "Do you think the hospital was going to take pity on us?" Do you think begging was going to save your father? I made sure it happened. I handled it. And I damn well earned my share. Amaya staggered back as though she'd been struck. You profited off my humiliation. Denise slammed the knife onto the cutting board. Humiliation? You saved your father's life. You'd be crying over his coffin if not for me. You think you're some saint? No, baby girl. You're just naive. You gave that man what he wanted. I made sure it counted. That's the difference between us. Amaya's vision blurred with tears, rage clawing up her throat. You disgust me. The words hung in the air, bitter and final. Later that night, she fled to the hospital, needing distance from Denise's venom. Her father lay asleep, tubes still taped to his skin, his chest rising slowly. Amaya sat at his bedside, clutching his frail hand, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. She didn't hear Adrian at first. When he stepped into the room, his reflection appeared in the window glass before his voice did. I didn't mean to intrude. Amaya stiffened, wiping her cheeks. Then don't. But he didn't leave. Instead, he lingered at the foot of the bed, his eyes shadowed. I heard enough. About your stepmother, about the money. You think I don't recognize betrayal when I see it? Her anger shifted, spilling over into him now. Why are you even here? To remind me how trapped I am? To warn me again about my role? Adrian's voice softened unexpectedly. No. To tell you that the night we shared, it wasn't just a transaction to me. It changed me. Her heart stumbled in her chest. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him not to romanticize what had been forced upon her by desperation. But his tone carried no manipulation this time, only raw truth. You think I wanted to spend my last days with a stranger? I didn't, he continued, his gaze fixed on her. But you gave me honesty when everyone else gave me lies. And I don't forget that her throat tightened. She opened her mouth, but the words caught. The next day, Tasha barged into the apartment, waving a file she had snatched through a friend at King Holdings. I found something, she announced breathlessly. That VS Holdings account, it's connected to Victor Sloan. Amaya's chest went cold. The COO, Adrian's enemy. Her stepmother hadn't just betrayed her. She had taken blood money from Adrian's rival. Tasha grabbed her arm. This isn't just about you anymore. They're using you as a weapon against him. By evening, the chaos followed Amaya into public again. Adrian was scheduled for a charity dinner downtown, and she had no choice but to appear by his side. The cameras adored the image. Adrian King, freshly risen from the ashes of his supposed death, arm in arm with his mysterious fiancée. But the world didn't stop for appearances. Evelyn Harper did not miss her cue. She slid in beside Adrian with a perfectly rehearsed sigh, her hand brushing his sleeve, her lips grazing close to his cheek. Oh, Adrian, she cooed loud enough for the photographers to catch. I've missed you. I'm so glad you're alive. The flashes lit up like fireworks, catching the angle just so. It looked like a kiss, a lover's reunion. Amaya froze in her seat, humiliation crashing over her. Every whisper she'd endured, every cruel comment online, every headline branding her a mistress. Evelyn had just fed them more fuel. Her chest tightened, fury and heartbreak clashing inside her until she could barely breathe. She couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't play the smiling fiancé while being made into a fool. She rose, her chair scraping against the marble floor, the sound cutting through the murmur of voices. Adrian turned, surprise flickering across his features. Amaya! But she didn't let him finish. I'm done, she said, her voice low but trembling with power. You wanted an actress, Adrian? Find another. I won't play this part anymore. Gasps rippled across the room. Phones lifted, recording every second as Amaya tore the glittering engagement ring from her finger and slammed it onto the table. Jonah's face paled. Adrian's jaw clenched. Evelyn's smile widened ever so slightly. And then, as if rehearsed for this very moment, Evelyn stepped forward, a leather folder in hand. Her voice dripped with venom as she handed it to the nearest journalist. "Proof," she declared, her words echoing across the hall. This engagement was nothing more than a PR stunt. The cameras went wild. Reporters lunged forward. Adrian's hand twitched as though he might rip the folder away, but it was too late. The storm had broken, and Amaya stood in the center of it, her world crumbling around her once more. The boardroom at King Holdings Tower was colder than any hospital room Amaya had ever stepped into. The glass walls overlooked Atlanta's skyline, but no view could soften the severity in the air. Men and women in sharp suits sat around the polished obsidian table, their eyes darting between Adrian King at the head and Victor Sloan, who looked far too smug for a man pretending loyalty. Amaya had been ushered into the room at Adrian's side, though she felt more like a lamb being led into the lion's den. Cameras weren't allowed here, but the real damage was worse. Minutes from now, the fate of Adrian's empire would be decided behind closed doors. Victor's voice oozed confidence as he laid a leather folder onto the table. "Mr. Chairman, esteemed colleagues," he began smoothly, "I regret to inform you that we have irrefutable evidence this so-called engagement between Mr. King and Miss Brooks is nothing more than a staged arrangement. A PR stunt, shall we call it?" The board murmured in disapproval. Amaya's heart clenched. She could feel every pair of eyes piercing her, dissecting her, judging her worth like she was on trial. Adrian's jaw tightened. "This is slander," he said firmly, his voice carrying the room. "The board is not here to gossip about my personal life." Victor cut him off with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Not gossip. Proof." He slid photos and documents across the table. Grainy stills of Amaya at his penthouse weeks ago, Evelyn Harper's damning statements, and worst of all, the contract. A leaked, unsigned draft of the engagement agreement Jonah had prepared. Gasps rippled around the room. Amaya's chest constricted. She hadn't even seen that version. To the board it looked like cold, calculated deception. Victor leaned back, basking in the moment. "The optics are disastrous. Investors are already nervous after the failed treatment leak. Now this? Our CEO is engaging in false narratives, exposing the company to scandal. I move that we suspend Adrian King as CEO pending formal inquiry." The chairman cleared his throat, trying to maintain order, but Adrian's knuckles were white against the armrest. His empire, the legacy he had fought to control, was slipping away in front of her eyes. Jonah stood quickly, voice razor-sharp. "The contract was never executed. It proves nothing. You're twisting half-truths into a narrative because you want his chair, Victor." But the board was murmuring, nodding, glancing at each other like a pack ready to turn. Amaya knew that look. She had seen vultures circle like that once before, in the hospital billing office, when they smelled desperation. The vote was swift, brutal. "In light of these allegations and potential reputational damage to King Holdings," the chairman announced, "the board hereby suspends Adrian King as CEO, effective immediately. Pending investigation, the gavel might as well have slammed into Amaya's chest." Adrian didn't flinch, though his eyes darkened with fury. He rose slowly, adjusting his cufflinks like a man refusing to bow. "This company will regret the day it let a parasite lead its council." "Mark my words," his gaze cut to Victor, who only smiled wider. Then Adrian's eyes flicked to Amaya, just for a heartbeat. There was no anger there, only the weight of something unsaid, before he turned and walked out of the boardroom. Outside, the world didn't soften. If anything, It sharpened. Amaya could feel the shift immediately as whispers chased her down the hallway, staff averting their eyes, some even smirking. She wasn't a fiancée anymore. She wasn't even a scandal worth hiding. She was debris from a wreck everyone had seen coming. When she reached her apartment later, the harassment had followed her home. Trolls online had dug up her address, and now angry voices echoed from the street below. She drew the curtains shut, but the pounding of her pulse matched every shout of gold digger and fraud. Her phone buzzed with a dozen missed calls. Adrian, Jonah, even Tasha. She ignored them all. Instead, she pulled the engagement ring from her nightstand, the ring that had been both a shield and a shackle, and stared at it until her vision blurred. It had once felt heavy with responsibility. Now it just felt like a brand. She slid it into a padded envelope, scrawled Adrian's name across the front, and dropped it into the apartment mailbox. Final. Irrevocable. Her phone lit again. Another incoming call. She silenced it without looking. She couldn't face him, not after everything. Not when she wasn't sure if his defense at the gala had been real or just another move in his endless chess game. That night, Tasha stormed into her apartment with takeout cartons and fire in her eyes. "Girl, you can't just disappear on me like this. The whole city's dragging your name through the mud and you're sitting here with the curtains shut?" "Nah." Talk, Amaya shook her head, her voice cracking. "There's nothing left to say, Tasha. He's done. I'm done. They suspended him. And I walked away." Tasha slammed the cartons down. "You think Victor Sloan and Evelyn Harper are gonna stop just because you gave up? Number, they're just getting started, and if you don't fight back, they'll bury both of you alive." But Amaya couldn't find the strength. Her father was all that mattered now. If she had to be hated by the entire world to keep him breathing, so be it. The next morning, Amaya woke to Evelyn Harper's face plastered across every news station. The glamorous socialite sat poised in a cream silk blouse, her smile sharp enough to cut diamonds. "I only speak because I care about Adrian," Evelyn purred to the interviewer. "He's vulnerable. And I hate to see someone like him manipulated. That girl, Amaya, she's no fiancée. She's a prop, a scheme to protect his company while lining her pockets." Amaya gripped the arm of the couch so hard her knuckles whitened. Evelyn's performance was flawless, concern laced with venom, sympathy wrapped around poison. By the time the segment ended, public opinion had shifted further, hashtags trending with new fury. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. But the sound that pierced her instead was the sharp ring of her phone. It was the hospital. Her stomach dropped. She answered with trembling fingers. "Hello?" The nurse's voice was brisk but urgent. "Miss Brooks, I'm sorry to inform you. Your father's insurance has been flagged for fraud. Coverage has been denied. Unless the balance is cleared by tonight, he'll be transferred out of critical care." Amaya's knees buckled. No, that's not possible. "He needs care. He'll die." "I'm truly sorry," the nurse said, her tone flat with overuse. "But we can't proceed without payment." The line clicked dead. Amaya sank to the floor, the phone slipping from her hand. She had lost Adrian. She had lost the public. And now, she might lose her father too. The walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in, the voices of the crowd outside growing louder, crueler, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Amaya wondered if she had the strength to keep fighting at all. The fluorescent lights of Midtown Medical hummed faintly above Amaya as she leaned against the sterile white wall outside her father's room. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the doctors passing by. Ken Brooks lay inside, tubes hooked to his fragile body, the faint rise and fall of his chest, the only proof he was still clinging to life. But none of that mattered if the hospital threw him out. And they would, unless she found money she didn't have. Amaya rubbed her temples, trying to hold back the tears that burned at the corners of her eyes. Her hands shook as she opened her purse. Inside was the padded envelope she had used to return the engagement ring to Adrian King. She'd told herself that sending it back was closure, but right now, it looked like salvation, or at least the price of her father's next breath. She clenched it tight. If she pawned the ring, if she begged a jeweler to take it, maybe she could cover the medication and buy time. Time was the only currency left to her. That night, Atlanta's West End felt colder than usual. The neon signs of pawn shops flickered like weary stars, and Amaya stepped inside the third one she'd tried that evening. A heavy-set man with thinning hair glanced up from behind the counter, his eyes immediately narrowing on the gleaming diamond she set down. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, suspicion dripping from every word. "It's mine," she lied, her voice flat. "Family heirloom. I just need cash." He turned the ring under the harsh light, lips curling into a smirk. "This is worth a fortune, but you're not walking out of here with anything close to that." Amaya bit the inside of her cheek. "How much?" He scribbled a number on a scrap of paper and pushed it across the counter. It was barely a fraction of the ring's worth, but still enough to cover Ken's meds for now. She closed her eyes, then nodded. The man counted out bills, his smile widening. "Pleasure doing business, sweetheart." She left with cash in her pocket, but a hollowness in her chest that felt heavier than anything she'd ever carried. Back at the hospital, she paid for Ken's treatments, barely breathing as the nurse processed the payment. "He'll remain in critical care," the nurse finally confirmed. Amaya exhaled a shaky breath. She had bought time, maybe days, maybe weeks, but at what cost? As she walked out into the parking lot, a shadow detached itself from the alley. Two men in dark hoodies stepped into her path, their faces obscured. "Hey, sweetheart," one drawled. "Word is your daddy owes, and now you're paying." Her stomach dropped. Debt collectors. "I already paid the hospital." "You have no right." The man grabbed her wrist, twisting hard enough to make her gasp. "Your stepmama's debts don't just disappear. You want to keep daddy breathing? You'll find a way to pay us too." She yanked free, fear surging into anger. "Stay away from him." From us they laughed, walking off into the night, but the threat lingered like smoke. The next morning, Amaya arrived at the hospital to find her father stable but still weak. Relief warred with despair. She sat by his bedside, smoothing his sheets, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Her phone buzzed. A new headline lit the screen. "Evelyn Harper donates millions to Midtown Medical, saving patients in crisis." Amaya froze, scanning the article. Evelyn's radiant face smiled from the photo, her hand gracefully placed on a hospital donor wall. But Amaya knew the truth instantly. That donation, the one that had cleared the hospital's fraud hold, hadn't come from Evelyn. It had come from Adrian. Jonah must have arranged it. Evelyn had stolen the credit, positioning herself as the savior. Her blood boiled. Evelyn had taken the only thing left, Amaya's dignity, and twisted it for her own glory. Later that afternoon, Tasha barged into the hospital cafeteria, her phone clutched like evidence. "Girl, I knew it. Look," she dropped into the seat beside Amaya and thrust the phone in her face. On the screen was a web of photos, documents, and arrows, a conspiracy board. At the center, Victor Sloan. Around him, shell companies, including VS Holdings. "Tasha," Amaya's voice wavered. "Listen," Tasha pressed. "I got confirmation from my friend inside King Holdings. Victor was behind the fraud flag that almost killed your dad. And get this, he's tied to the shell company that paid Denise." Amaya's throat closed. Denise, her own stepmother. It was like watching a puzzle snap into place. Only the picture was uglier than she'd imagined. Denise had sold her. Victor had pulled the strings. Evelyn had painted herself as a hero, and she had lost Adrian in the crossfire. Tasha squeezed her hand. "We can take them down. Jonah's building a case. We just need proof strong enough to burn their whole house of cards." Amaya wanted to believe her, but she felt so tired, so hollow. Rock bottom wasn't just a phrase, it was a place, and she was sitting in it, drowning in betrayal, humiliation, and fear. That night, she walked alone through the hospital parking lot, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She thought about Adrian, the man who had been cold and cruel the first night, yet had risked his reputation to defend her. The man who had secretly saved her father's life again, even when she'd pushed him away. Her chest ached. She wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to say thank you. But what if he didn't answer? What if he hated her now for giving up on him? She stared at her phone until the screen went dark. She couldn't bring herself to press dial. Instead, she whispered into the night, "Thank you, Adrian." And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse stripped of its power, Adrian King sat alone, staring at the same sky, wondering if the woman who had once given him her last asset would ever give him her trust. The next morning, Amaya's phone buzzed with a message from Tasha. It wasn't just gossip, it was proof. A photo board image flashed onto her screen. Victor Sloan, Evelyn Harper, and the shell company VS Holdings, connected in one damning web of evidence. Amaya's breath caught. Finally, the truth. But could she survive long enough to use it? Rain streaked the wide windows of Adrian King's Buckhead townhouse. City lights smeared into fractured colors. He sat in silence at the edge of the leather sofa, a tumbler of untouched bourbon in his hand. His empire had been ripped from him, his reputation smeared across headlines, and the woman who had once looked at him with reluctant vulnerability had disappeared into silence. But none of that hurt as much as the envelope he had received hours earlier. Inside, nestled against a stark white note card with no words written, had been the engagement ring. Returned. Final. He told himself he didn't care. He had built fortunes on walking away from losses, yet here he was, staring at that ring like it was the only thing tethering him to air. The buzzer rang. At first, he ignored it, assuming Jonah had returned with more bad news. Then the sound grew louder, insistent. He set down the glass and opened the door. And there she was, Amaya Brooks, soaked through from the storm, her hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes flashing with a fury that was only barely disguising hurt. She didn't wait to be invited in. She shoved past him, clutching her phone in one hand and a folded sheet of paper in the other. "You did it," she accused, her voice shaking. "You cleared the fraud hold on my father's insurance." "You saved him," Adrian froze. "Who told you?" Her chest heaved. "Does it matter? It was you. And you let Evelyn Harper take the credit while I thought you'd abandoned me." For the first time in days, Adrian felt something stir inside him. Not anger, not coldness, just raw exhaustion. "I didn't care about the credit, Amaya. I cared about your father surviving." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you let me know it was you?" He stepped closer, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. "Because every time I tried to reach out, you pushed me away. And I thought, maybe you wanted me gone. Maybe you wanted freedom from all of this." Her laugh broke into a sob. "Freedom? I've been drowning since the day my stepmother sold me to you. And the only person who ever tried to pull me out was the same man I swore I hated." Silence hung heavy between them, punctuated only by the storm outside. Adrian lifted a hand, but stopped short of touching her. "Then say it, Amaya. Do you hate me?" Her breath caught. She stared at him, every muscle in her body trembling, before she finally whispered, "No. I don't hate you. I never did. The words undid him. Without thinking, Adrian closed the space between them and kissed her. Not like the first night, transactional, cold. This kiss was fire meeting oxygen. Choice, not contract. Desire, not desperation. When they pulled apart, Amaya's hands lingered on his chest. "We can't keep letting them win," she said. "Victor, Evelyn, Denise, they've been pulling the strings. Tasha found proof. We can end this, Adrian. Together." Hours later, Jonah paced the townhouse living room, shaking his head. "You're insane. Both of you. Do you have any idea how dangerous Victor Sloan is? If he feels the walls closing in, he won't just roll over. He'll bury you. Which is why we have to move now," Amaya said, her chin raised. She slid the damning printouts Tasha had uncovered across the table. Wire transfers, shell company receipts, photos linking Victor to Denise and Evelyn. "We don't have enough to take him to court yet. But we have enough to bait him." To make him confess, Jonah rubbed his temples. "You're talking about entrapment." Adrian leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold steel again. "I'm talking about survival. He's already tried to kill me once by tampering with my medical records. He went after Amaya's father. He's not stopping until he owns this company and buries us both. We don't wait for his next move." We set the board, Jonah exhaled slowly. "You're playing with fire. But fine, what's the plan?" Adrian's gaze shifted to Amaya. "Victor believes he's untouchable. That's his weakness. We'll feed him what he wants most, a chance to finish me off and tie up loose ends. He'll come, and when he does, we'll be ready." Amaya's phone buzzed before Jonah could protest. She glanced down and froze. A message lit the screen. Anonymous but unmistakable. "Come alone if you want your father to live." Her stomach dropped. Attached was a photo. Ken in his hospital bed, a masked nurse standing over him. "No," she whispered, her hands trembling. Adrian grabbed the phone, his face darkening. "This is Victor." Jonah's jaw clenched. "He's forcing her hand." Adrian turned to Amaya, his voice low but fierce. "You're not going alone. Do you hear me? I won't let you." But Amaya was already shaking her head. "If I don't, he'll kill my father. I can't take that risk." Adrian stepped closer, gripping her shoulders. "Amaya, listen to me. This is exactly what he wants. Divide us, make you walk in vulnerable. If you go alone, you might not come back." Tears slid down her cheeks, mixing with the rain still clinging to her. "If it means saving my dad, I'll walk into hell itself." The storm outside howled louder, rattling the windows as though echoing the war raging inside them all. Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only anchor left in his sinking world. "Then we go together. Do you hear me? Together," but Amaya's silence said otherwise. That night, Amaya stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. But there was something new there too. Resolve. She had been dragged, humiliated, used as a pawn, but not anymore. She reached for the necklace Tasha had given her earlier, a delicate silver locket. Inside, hidden from sight, was a tiny recording device, their one chance. She whispered to her reflection, "For you, Daddy. And maybe, for me too," then she slipped out into the night. The warehouse loomed in Atlanta's West End, its rusted steel doors yawning open like a monster's mouth. Amaya stepped inside, her heels clicking against the damp concrete, her heartbeat deafening in her ears. A steel door slammed shut behind her. Victor Sloan's voice echoed from the shadows, smooth and venomous. "Welcome, Miss Brooks." Brave of you to come alone, Amaya forced her chin up, even as fear gnawed at her spine. "Where's my father?" Victor stepped into the dim light, his smile cruel. "Alive for now. That depends on you unseen above them. The tiny mic in her locket glowed red. Jonah's recorder was live, and across the city, Adrian King was already on his way. The warehouse reeked of oil and rust, a suffocating perfume of decay. Water dripped steadily from pipes overhead, echoing in the cavernous space like a cruel metronome counting down to disaster. Amaya's heels clicked against the damp concrete as she was shoved forward by one of Victor Sloane's men. The steel door slammed shut behind her, the sound reverberating through her bones. Her breath hitched, every nerve screamed at her to run, but her father's frail image on the phone, Ken in his hospital bed with that masked nurse hovering, kept her rooted. She couldn't run, not if it meant his life. Victor emerged from the shadows like a spider from its web, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed absurdly out of place here. His smile was slow, deliberate, his eyes glittering with the kind of arrogance that came from believing he controlled every piece on the board. "Well, well, Miss Brooks," his voice carried easily in the cavernous room. "You came just as I knew you would. Alone, desperate, loyal to a fault." Predictable Amaya forced herself to raise her chin. "Where's my father?" Victor signaled, and a large screen flickered to life on the far wall. The feed showed Ken's hospital room, the beeping heart monitor, the oxygen mask, the fragile rise and fall of his chest, and beside him, the nurse, her face obscured by a surgical mask. Amaya's chest constricted. "If you hurt him," Victor cut her off with a chuckle. "Relax, he's alive, for now. But whether he stays that way depends entirely on you." Unseen beneath the silver locket at her throat, the tiny mic Tasha had given her glowed red. Every word, every threat, was being streamed to Jonah and Adrian. She prayed the connection held. Victor circled her slowly, like a predator enjoying the scent of fear. "Do you know what your stepmother did for me? She was quite resourceful, actually. Sold me your loyalty for a price, and I thought, why not? A dying man's last night should be memorable. Only Adrian King didn't die. How inconvenient Amaya's stomach twisted. He knew everything." Victor leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. "But don't worry. I'll finish the job, and when Adrian King is nothing but ashes, you'll be free to crawl back into whatever gutter you came from." Her palm itched to slap him, but she held herself still, because the longer he talked, the more rope he gave himself to hang with. The warehouse lights flickered, a low rumble grew louder outside, and then headlights. Adrian King's black SUV screeched to a halt in front of the warehouse, its engine growling like a beast unchained. Victor's smirk faltered. The steel door groaned as it was forced open. Adrian stormed inside, drenched in rain, his presence filling the space like a storm given human form. Behind him, Jonah trailed with a small earpiece, scanning the scene, every movement precise. "Step away from her," Adrian commanded, his voice thunder. Victor spread his arms mockingly. "Ah, the man who refuses to die. How poetic. Come to rescue your little pawn." Adrian's jaw flexed. "She was never a pawn. She's the reason I'm still breathing." For the first time, Victor's smile cracked, and then chaos erupted. One of Victor's men lunged, a glint of steel flashing in his hand. Adrian intercepted, fist connecting with the man's jaw with a sickening crack. Another came from behind. Jonah shoved him back, swinging a metal pipe with surprising ferocity. Amaya stumbled back, her heart racing, as the warehouse dissolved into a battlefield. Adrian fought like a man possessed, every punch fueled by weeks of rage, betrayal, and desperation. Blood spattered the concrete, shouts echoed, the air thick with the copper tang of violence. Through it all, Victor stood calm, watching, calculating. Evelyn Harper appeared then, stepping out from the shadows, her perfect hair and designer heels so absurd against the grimy floor, it almost looked surreal. Her eyes widened at the chaos, her hands trembling. "Victor, this isn't what we agreed." "Quiet!" Victor snapped. "You wanted your place back at Adrian's side." "This is the price," Evelyn flinched. For the first time, doubt flickered across her perfect mask. Adrian slammed another man to the floor, breathing hard, sweat and blood streaking his face. He turned, eyes locking on Victor. "It ends tonight." Victor laughed, pulling a gun from his jacket. "Oh, I agree." The world froze. Amaya's breath caught. Jonah raised his hand slowly. Adrian didn't flinch, his eyes locked on the barrel. Victor tilted his head. "Do you know why you were given a terminal prognosis, Adrian?" "Because I made sure of it. I falsified the records, manipulated the tests, leaked the results. You were never dying, at least not until I decided you should." Amaya gasped. The words were gold, confession dripping from his tongue. Her locket mic glowed brighter. Jonah's voice crackled faintly in Adrian's hidden earpiece. "We've got it!" Every word. But Victor wasn't done. He stepped closer, gun unwavering. "You think you can build empires on grit and talent?" "Number. Power is the only currency that matters. And tonight, I cash in." Adrian moved faster than Amaya thought possible. He lunged, slamming into Victor's arm just as the gun fired. The shot cracked through the warehouse, deafening, ricocheting off steel beams. Screams. Chaos. Evelyn stumbled back, clutching her ears. The gun skittered across the floor. Amaya dove, her knees scraping concrete as she grabbed it. For a heartbeat, the weight of it in her hands terrified her. Could she? Would she? Victor roared, shoving Adrian back. He lunged for her, eyes wild. Amaya raised the gun, hands trembling. "Don't you dare touch him!" Victor froze, laughter bubbling up despite the danger. "You won't shoot me. You're too soft, too weak." But before she could answer, red and blue lights flooded the warehouse windows. Sirens wailed closer, louder. Jonah grinned, blood on his lip. "Show's over, Victor." Victor's eyes narrowed. He spun, knocking a barrel with his elbow. Liquid gushed onto the floor. Gasoline, its acrid scent filling the air. "Oh no," Amaya whispered. Victor struck a match, grinning as the flame danced. "If I go down, I'll take you all with me." He dropped it. The warehouse erupted into fire. Flames licked the walls, smoke billowing thick and fast. The exit door was blocked, the air choking. Evelyn shrieked, stumbling in her heels. Jonah tried to drag her, coughing violently. Adrian grabbed Amaya, pulling her toward the back, but a steel gate slammed shut, trapping them in the inferno. The heat seared Amaya's skin. Smoke clawed at her lungs. She coughed violently, vision blurring. "Adrian!" He pounded the gate with his fists, roaring in frustration. "Hold on, Amaya. I'll get you out." But her knees buckled. Darkness clawed at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was Adrian's frantic face through the haze, his voice breaking as he shouted her name. Then the world went black. The flames raged. Smoke devoured the warehouse. Amaya lay crumpled on the floor, her body limp. Adrian smashed at the lock, bloodied and desperate. Firefighters' sirens wailed outside. But would they reach them in time? The locket mic, half buried under debris, still glowed red, proof of Victor's confession. But Amaya wasn't moving. The warehouse was a furnace. Flames licked up steel beams, collapsing supports shrieked like tortured metal, and smoke poured in heavy waves that clawed at the lungs. The fire fed on spilled gasoline, turning every breath into a battle. Adrian King slammed his fists against the steel gate, his knuckles raw and bleeding. "Amaya, stay with me. Open your eyes." His voice tore through the inferno, desperate, feral. But Amaya lay limp on the concrete floor, her body curled, her skin pale against the dark smoke. Her chest rose in shallow, struggling gasps. Each cough was weaker than the last. Jonah's voice crackled in Adrian's ear through the comms. "We've got the confession, every word. But if you don't get her out now, she won't make it." Adrian roared in frustration, yanking at the lock until his palms blistered. The gate didn't budge. Heat blistered his skin. Smoke made his vision blur. He grabbed a steel rod from the ground and swung with all his strength, sparks flying as metal slammed against metal. Nothing. The flames advanced, greedy, curling closer. Evelyn screamed somewhere in the distance, her cries muffled by Jonah, dragging her toward an exit. She stumbled, sobbing, her mask of glamour burned away in the chaos. Adrian turned back to Amaya, his chest heaving. She wasn't moving anymore. "God, no!" His knees buckled beside her, his hand cradling her face. "Don't you dare leave me! Don't you dare!" He pressed his lips to her forehead, then rose, rage fueling him beyond human limits. With a final, primal cry, he swung the steel rod again and again. The lock bent, cracked, then shattered. The gate screeched open. Adrian scooped Amaya into his arms, her head lolling against his chest. He staggered through the smoke, lungs screaming, vision tunneling. Every step felt like dragging himself through hell, but he kept moving because the thought of leaving her behind was worse than the fire itself. At last, air. Firefighters surged in from the front, axes and hoses slicing through the inferno. Adrian stumbled into their path, clutching Amaya like fragile glass. "She's not breathing!" he shouted. Two paramedics rushed forward, guiding him out into the night. Cold rain pelted down, hissing as it hit smoldering embers. Adrian collapsed to his knees on the wet asphalt, laying Amaya down gently. "Get oxygen on her!" one paramedic barked. Another pressed a mask over Amaya's face, pumping the bag with rapid, urgent squeezes. Adrian hovered, trembling, drenched, his eyes fixed on her unmoving chest. He'd faced hostile takeovers, betrayals, even death itself, but nothing terrified him like this silence. Jonah staggered out of the warehouse behind them, coughing violently, his suit torn and soot-streaked. He clutched the small recorder in his hand like a holy relic. "We got it," he rasped. "Victor's confession." It's over, but Adrian barely heard him. His world had shrunk to one fragile figure lying on the ground. Inside the chaos, Victor Sloan had fled. His figure vanished into the night, the fire raging behind him. But his voice still lingered in the air, his arrogance, his confession. And now, captured by Jonah, it was about to destroy him. Firefighters swarmed the warehouse, media vans screeched to a stop at the perimeter, and the night became a stage. Reporters thrust cameras and microphones forward, hungry for carnage. Adrian rose, his hair plastered to his forehead, his shirt torn, his arms streaked with Amaya's blood. He turned, his voice hoarse, but unflinching. "Amaya Brooks saved my life twice, and I'll spend the rest of mine making sure the world knows who she really is. My future." The cameras caught every word, broadcasting them live. Behind him, paramedics lifted Amaya onto a stretcher. Her pulse was thready, her breaths shallow. Sirens wailed as they wheeled her into the ambulance. Adrian tried to climb in, but a paramedic blocked him. "We need space. If you want her to live, let us work." He froze, torn between fury and helplessness. Then Amaya's hand slipped limply off the stretcher, dangling in the air. Adrian caught it, squeezing desperately. "Hold on, Amaya," he whispered, tears streaking his soot-stained face. "Don't leave me now." "Not when I finally found you." The ambulance doors slammed shut. Inside, the ride was a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. "Pulse dropping. Charging to 200. Clear." Amaya's body jerked as the defibrillator shocked her chest. The monitor beeped once, then flatlined again. "No, no, no," the medic muttered, sweat dripping down his temple. "Charging again?" Adrian rode behind them in a separate escort car, his knuckles white as he gripped the seat in front of him. Every siren wail, every red flash, felt like a countdown. Jonah sat beside him, his recorder clutched tight, but even he looked pale. In the ambulance, Amaya drifted in a haze between fire and silence. She saw flashes, her father's smile, Tasha's laugh, Adrian's eyes the night he had begged her for honesty. A warmth pulled her forward, but darkness tugged harder. "Clear!" Her body jolted again. The heart monitor beeped weakly, then flatlined once more. The medic swore under his breath. "We're losing her!" Outside, the escort car hit a bump, jolting Adrian forward. He couldn't take it anymore. He leapt out at the next red light, ignoring Jonah's shouts, sprinting to the ambulance. He pounded on the back doors. "Let me in! Please, let me in!" The doors opened just enough for him to climb inside. The medics barked protests, but Adrian ignored them, kneeling beside Amaya. He grasped her cold hand, pressing it against his cheek. "You don't get to leave me, Amaya. Not after everything. You fought for your father, for your dignity, for me. Fight for this. Fight for us." The monitor stuttered, a faint, fragile blip, then another. The medic's eyes widened. "We've got a rhythm!" Adrian broke down, his forehead pressed to her hand, tears mingling with soot and rain. By the time they reached the hospital, Amaya was stabilized, barely. Doctors rushed her into emergency care, Adrian pacing outside like a man on the edge of madness. Jonah arrived moments later, his tie torn, his recorder still clutched like evidence of war. Reporters had already gathered outside, their voices rising with every rumor. Evelyn Harper was nowhere to be found, and Victor Sloan on the run, but his empire already crumbling under the weight of his own arrogance. Jonah placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder. "We've got his confession. It's ironclad. Once we hand this over, Victor's finished. Adrian barely heard him. His eyes stayed fixed on the red light above the ER doors, praying for it to turn green. Inside, machines beeped steadily, nurses moved quickly, and Amaya Brooks fought her way back from the edge. Hours later, exhausted and soot-stained, Adrian stood before a wall of microphones outside Midtown Medical. Cameras flashed like gunfire. Voices clamored for answers. He raised his head, his eyes burning with both exhaustion and conviction. Tonight, the truth came out. Victor Sloan orchestrated lies, fraud, and betrayal. But that's not the story I want you to hear. The story is this: a woman who was sold, shamed, and underestimated stood tall. Amaya Brooks is not a scandal. She is the reason I'm alive. And if the world wants to mock me for standing by her, so be it. The crowd roared, some jeered, some applauded. But the tide was shifting. Inside, Amaya's chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of survival. In the ambulance earlier, the monitor had flatlined. Now, hours later, as Adrian waited outside her room, the steady beeps faltered again. Nurses rushed in, shouting orders. Adrian froze, terror clawing his throat. He thought he had saved her, but fate wasn't done testing them. The chapter closed on the shrill, piercing sound of a flatline. Again, the shrill, piercing flatline seemed to last forever. Nurses shouted orders, their bodies swarming around Amaya's bed in the emergency ward. Adrian stood frozen in the doorway, his heart in his throat, unable to move as the monitors blared. He had walked through fire to drag her out. He had held her hand through the ambulance ride, begged her to live. And now, here she was, slipping again. "Clear!" the doctor barked. Amaya's body jolted as the defibrillator paddles shocked her chest. The monitor flickered, hesitated, then beeped. Once, twice. A weak rhythm returned, fragile but steady. Adrian collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, trembling. His entire world had hung in the space of those seconds, and he'd felt what it meant to lose it. When the doctor finally looked at him and said, "She's stable," he nearly wept. Hours blurred into days. Adrian never left the hospital. He sat at her bedside, his large frame folded into the too small chair, his hand never letting go of hers. The machines beeped steadily now, a metronome of life that both soothed and haunted him. Jonah came and went, updating him on the fallout. Victor Sloan was officially on the run, his assets frozen, his face plastered on every news broadcast. Evelyn Harper had been cornered by reporters outside her high-rise, her sobbing, "I didn't know," playing on repeat across social feeds. But Adrian barely cared. The empire could burn, the city could talk. He only wanted Amaya to open her eyes again. On the third morning, as sunlight streamed weakly through the blinds, her lashes fluttered. Adrian bolted upright, heart hammering. "Amaya!" His voice cracked, her lips parted, dry and pale. "Adrian?" He laughed, a raw, broken sound, pressing her hand to his cheek. "You scared me half to death. Don't ever do that again." She smiled faintly, weak but real. "Guess we're even then." Later that day, Ken Brooks was wheeled into the same ward, prepped for a follow-up surgery that had been in jeopardy for weeks. When Amaya asked how it was possible, how the hospital had agreed to cover it, Adrian quietly explained. "I started a foundation," he said simply, as though it were nothing. "The Hope and Heart Fund. It covers patients like your father, families who can't afford what the system demands." Amaya's eyes filled with tears. "You did that? For us?" "No," he said softly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "For you. For the woman who gave me a reason to fight when I thought I had none." But not everyone walked away clean. Denise Brooks was cornered soon after. Jonah's investigation had unearthed every wire transfer, every skimmed dollar, every betrayal. Adrian himself confronted her, his voice like ice. "You sold her," he said, the words cutting deeper than any blade. "And you pocketed blood money while her father lay dying." Denise broke, tears streaming as she collapsed into a chair. "I thought it was the only way. I thought she'd forgive me when it saved him." "She forgave too much already," Adrian snapped. "You'll repay every cent you took, and you'll serve the community you used to exploit. If you refuse, I'll make sure you never breathe free air again." Denise nodded, sobbing. The restitution papers were signed that afternoon, binding her to both repayment and community service hours at the very foundation Adrian had created. For once, she would be forced to face what she had done. That evening, Amaya was propped up against pillows, still weak but awake. The machines hummed softly, a reminder of her fragility. Adrian sat beside her, holding her hand, as if letting go might make her slip away again. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, his usually steady voice trembling. "About us." Amaya's brow furrowed. "Adrian, you don't have to—" "No," he cut her off, his hand tightening. "Listen. Everything between us started with contracts and lies. I forced you into a corner. I made you my fiancé on paper when what I really wanted was—" He swallowed, struggling for words that didn't come easily to men like him. "What I really wanted was you. Just you. No contracts, no deadlines, no boardroom votes." Her eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. Adrian dropped to one knee beside the hospital bed, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside gleamed a ring, not the cold, heavy symbol of their fake engagement, but something new, delicate, chosen with care. "Amaya Brooks," he said, his voice steady now. "Will you marry me? Not for business, not for appearances, but because I love you, and I don't want to live another day without knowing you'll be by my side." Tears spilled freely down Amaya's cheeks. For a moment she was too choked to speak, her hand trembling as it covered her mouth. Then she nodded, her whisper breaking into a laugh. "Yes, yes, Adrian, 1,000 times. Yes, he slipped the ring onto her finger, kissed her hand, then pressed his forehead against hers, his relief flooding through him like sunlight after endless rain. The next morning, as Ken came out of surgery, smiling faintly, Amaya wheeled herself into his room. She showed him the ring, laughing through tears as she told him about Adrian's proposal. Ken chuckled weakly, giving her a shaky thumbs up. "About time someone treated my baby girl right." Her heart swelled. For the first time in months, the world felt like it might finally be stitching itself back together. But luxurious tales never ends a chapter without a hook. That afternoon, as Amaya rested, a lawyer arrived at the hospital, briefcase in hand. He asked to speak with her privately, his eyes kind but serious. "Miss Brooks," he said gently, "I represent your late mother's estate. A document has come to light, a letter she left for you, and a deed. It seems she owned property she never disclosed, a cottage on Tybee Island." Amaya's breath caught, a place her mother had kept secret, waiting for her all these years. The lawyer slid the envelope into her hands. "She wanted you to have it. To build a life there when the time was right." Amaya stared down at the envelope, her heart pounding. Adrian's hand covered hers, grounding her. For the first time in forever, her future didn't feel stolen, it felt wide open. As Amaya clutched her mother's letter, her tears blurred the ink. The Tybee Island cottage was more than property. It was destiny, and the world, after all its storms, was about to see what they would build together. The Tybee Island cottage was exactly as Amaya's mother had described in the letter, a small, sun-bleached haven with whitewashed shutters, weathered wood decking, and a stretch of golden sand that kissed the Atlantic. When Amaya first saw it, her breath caught. It didn't feel like real estate. It felt like a memory brought back to life, as though her mother had reached across time to gift her a future. She stood barefoot on the deck the morning of the wedding, her toes curling against the warm planks. The sea air filled her lungs, crisp and salty, carrying with it the cry of gulls and the steady roar of the waves. For the first time in so long, she felt light. No contracts, no threats, no shadows lurking. Only the endless horizon and the man who had fought beside her through the darkest storms. Behind her, laughter drifted from the cottage. Tasha was inside, wrangling flowers, ribbons, and a frantic Jonah, who insisted that the boutonniere had to match the table arrangements. Amaya smiled to herself. Jonah, who had been a fortress of control through corporate wars, was unraveling over hydrangeas. "Girl, stop daydreaming and let me see you," Tasha called, her voice sharp but affectionate. Amaya turned, and her best friend gasped. The gown was simple, yet breathtaking. Ivory silk that draped her figure, the skirt flowing like liquid sunlight when she moved. Her hair, braided neatly and crowned with tiny pearls, shimmered as the light caught it. But what stilled Tasha was not the dress, nor the pearls. It was the glow in Amaya's face, a joy that outshone even the Atlantic sun. "You look like your mama's dream," Tasha whispered, her eyes glistening. Amaya clasped her hands together, fighting tears. "She wanted me to build a life here. And today, it feels like she's with me." The ceremony was set on the sand, where chairs draped in linen faced a wooden arch wrapped in fresh flowers. The waves rolled behind them, an eternal witness. Friends, board allies, and community members from Adrian's foundation filled the seats, their voices hushed with reverence. Adrian stood at the altar in a tailored cream suit, his dreadlocks tied neatly back, his usually sharp features softened by anticipation. He had weathered hostile takeovers, the betrayal of trusted partners, and the collapse of his carefully built empire. None of it had shaken him the way waiting for Amaya did now. His hands fidgeted with the repaired silver bracelet he held in his pocket, the very one she had left behind that first night. Jonah leaned over, muttering, "Breathe, Adrian. You look like you're about to negotiate a merger with God himself." Adrian chuckled nervously, straightening his jacket, but when the music swelled and Amaya appeared, walking barefoot across the sand, the world narrowed to her. Every guest blurred into nothing, every sound but the ocean faded. It was just her. Tasha officiated, her voice steady with pride. "We're here today, not just to witness vows, but to honor a story. A story of two people who found love not in fairy tales or easy paths, but in fire, in storms, and in choices that tested everything they believed. Yet here they stand, stronger because of it." Adrian reached for Amaya's hands, his thumbs brushing over her skin, as though to reassure himself she was real. "Amaya Brooks," he began, his voice low but carrying. "The night we met, I thought I was dying. You were supposed to be a stranger who slipped in and out of my life. Instead, you became my reason to live. I fought for breath, for strength, for tomorrow, because I wanted to see you again. I wanted to know the woman who gave everything when she had nothing to spare. Today, I don't give you contracts, or deals, or promises I can negotiate. I give you myself, only myself, and all I ask is that you let me love you until my last day." Amaya's tears spilled freely as she tried to steady her voice. "Adrian, I thought that night would break me, but somehow it saved me. You saved me. You showed me what it means to be seen, even when I thought I had nothing worth looking at. You taught me that love isn't about power or perfection. It's about choice. And today, I choose you. I'll keep choosing you, every day, no matter what storms come." The crowd hushed, many wiping their eyes. Even Jonah sniffled, slipping on his sunglasses to hide it. Tasha grinned through her own tears. "Well then, by the power vested in me, and by the sheer nerve it took to survive everything y'all survived, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Adrian, kiss your bride." The kiss was tender at first, then deepened, the roar of the waves rising like applause. The guests erupted in cheers, some standing to clap, others tossing flower petals into the wind. Later, during the reception on the deck, the sun hung low over the horizon, painting the ocean in strokes of gold and pink. Tables overflowed with southern dishes, shrimp and grits, peach cobbler, sweet tea in mason jars. Children danced barefoot in the sand, while music from a live band carried on the breeze. Amaya laughed as Jonah tried and failed to keep rhythm with one of the bridesmaids, his stiff shoulders earning gentle teasing. Tasha, meanwhile, had 3 different men vying for her attention, her sharp retorts making them grin wider. For once, the world felt unshaken. As the sky turned dusky purple, Adrian led Amaya to the edge of the deck. He pulled the silver bracelet from his pocket, the same one she had worn that first night. "You left this behind," he said softly, clasping it around her wrist, "but it never left me. Every time I looked at it, I remembered why I wanted to fight, why I wanted to live." Amaya touched it, her heart twisting with tenderness. "Then it's not just jewelry, it's our beginning." They swayed together as the band played a slow, soulful tune, their silhouettes bathed in twilight. From the dunes, Evelyn Harper watched. She was dressed in muted gray, her makeup minimal, her once pristine image worn down by scandal. She held no cameras now, no allies waiting in the wings. Only silence. She watched the couple, radiant and unshakable, and something in her finally broke free. Without a word, she turned and walked away down the shoreline, leaving the past behind. Adrian pressed his lips to Amaya's temple. "This is our life now," he murmured. She leaned into him, eyes on the endless sea. For the first time in years, she believed it. But luxurious tales always leaves the door cracked for tomorrow. As the night deepened and the guests began to drift home, Amaya's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, confused by the caller ID. Midtown Clinic. "Mrs. King?" the nurse's voice asked when she answered. "We wanted to confirm your recent labs. Congratulations. You're expecting." Amaya's breath caught. The ocean roared louder in her ears. Her free hand instinctively covered her abdomen, trembling. She turned to Adrian, his eyes questioning, and as tears filled her own, a slow smile spread across her face. The future was no longer a dream. It was already beginning. The cottage on Tybee Island glowed in the amber light of a Georgia sunset. White curtains billowed through open windows, letting in the salt-rich breeze. Laughter floated across the sand as children played by the waves, and music hummed from a small speaker on the porch. It was no longer just a cottage. It had become a home, a sanctuary built on the ruins of fire and betrayal. Inside, Amaya King leaned against the kitchen counter, her hand resting over her swollen belly. She was radiant, her face softened with the kind of joy that couldn't be faked. Her laugh came easily now, spilling out like sunlight as she watched Adrian trying and failing to assemble a wooden crib in the living room. "Adrian, it's upside down," she teased, pointing at the crooked legs sticking into the air. He looked up, sweat glistening on his brow, his dreadlocks tied back in a messy knot. "It's modern art," he deadpanned. "Our child will be very advanced." Amaya laughed, waddling over to him and lowering herself onto the couch. "Our child will have 2 left shoes if you keep putting furniture together like that." He grinned, leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Doesn't matter." As long as they've got your smile, her heart melted. Even after everything, the contracts, the lies, the danger, he still had the power to make her feel like the most precious person in the world. A year ago, Adrian had been fighting to keep his empire. Today he was using that empire to heal. The Hope and Heart Fund had become one of the fastest-growing philanthropic foundations in the South, providing medical aid for families like the Brooks. On the anniversary of its launch, the foundation hosted a gala, not in some glittering Buckhead ballroom, but right here on Tybee Island. Guests arrived barefoot, their gowns trailing in the sand, their tuxedos loosened by ocean breezes. Doctors, nurses, patients, and families mingled with board members and entrepreneurs, all united by one thing: the belief that no one should have to sell their soul for healthcare. Amaya, though heavily pregnant, gave the keynote. She stood barefoot under strings of lights, the surf crashing behind her, her hand resting on her belly as she spoke. "A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything. My father's health, my dignity, my freedom. But what I found was something greater, a community willing to fight for each other. This fund isn't just about medical bills. It's about restoring hope, about telling families they matter, that their lives matter." The crowd erupted in applause. Adrian, standing at the edge of the stage, felt his chest tighten with pride. She wasn't just his wife. She was his compass, his reason. Ken Brooks stood taller now, his shoulders broad again after months of rehabilitation. He wore a simple linen shirt, his weathered face glowing as he watched his daughter speak. "Never thought I'd see this day," he muttered, pride thick in his voice. Beside him, Jonah chuckled. "Never thought I'd see Adrian King barefoot either, but here we are." Ken's eyes softened as he looked at his daughter. "She saved me. Twice over. First my life, then my faith. Adrian joined them, slipping an arm around Amaya's waist as she stepped down from the stage. "And you gave me the best thing that's ever happened to me," Adrian said, his voice steady. "Your daughter." Ken's eyes shimmered, and he gave Adrian a firm nod. "Then you better keep proving you deserve her." If Amaya was the heart of the story, Tasha Reed was its flame. She had been there through every secret, every fight, every whispered warning. And now, at the gala, she was glowing in her own right. Her hand sparkled with a new diamond ring as her fiancé, Marcus, a King Holdings insider who had risked his career to feed her information against Victor Sloan, stood proudly beside her. "Girl," Tasha whispered to Amaya later when they snuck away from the crowd. "Who would have thought?" U.S. On a beach, rings on our fingers, babies on the way. Amaya laughed. "Babies?" Tasha grinned wickedly. "Don't play." "I got plans." The two women held hands, their bond stronger than ever. Whatever storms came, they knew they'd face them together. Perhaps the most shocking transformation was Denise Brooks. Once greedy, manipulative, and cold, she now stood in a volunteer's apron at the gala buffet, serving peach cobbler with a genuine smile. The restitution agreement had forced her into community service, but somewhere along the way, she had found a piece of herself she thought was lost. Amaya approached cautiously, unsure if old wounds could ever truly heal, but Denise's eyes met hers with something new, humility. "I don't expect forgiveness," Denise said softly, "but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. For you." For Ken, Amaya studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Actions speak louder than words. Keep showing me," and for the first time, Amaya believed she might. The one figure missing from the celebration was Evelyn Harper. Rumor placed her in Europe, far from the scandal she had helped ignite. Some said she lived in quiet obscurity now. Others whispered she was plotting her return. But for Amaya and Adrian, Evelyn was nothing more than a shadow, a ghost of a past they had survived. And when Amaya sometimes thought of her, she felt not anger, but pity. Evelyn had chased power and lost love. Amaya had chosen love and gained everything. As the gala wound down, the stars blanketed the sky. Adrian led Amaya onto the beach, their hands entwined. The waves lapped at their feet, cool and soothing. "I used to think my empire was everything," Adrian admitted, his voice low. "But standing here with you, with our child on the way, I realize the empire is just bricks and glass. You're my world." Amaya leaned into him, tears sliding down her cheeks. "And you're mine." Her belly shifted, and she gasped, grabbing his hand. "Adrian, the baby's kicking." He froze, then laughed with pure wonder as he felt it, the tiny, insistent pulse of life beneath his palm. His chest ached with joy so fierce it scared him. They sank to their knees in the sand, holding each other, the ocean singing around them. 1 year later, the story had come full circle. The girl who once sold her last asset to save her father now stood as a wife, a leader, and soon, a mother. The man who once clung to life in a hospital bed now lived for something greater than wealth, and together they had turned storms into sunlight. On the deck of the Tybee cottage, the family gathered for a sunset picnic. Jonah raised a toast, Tasha teased Marcus, Denise laughed softly with Ken, and Adrian kissed Amaya as the baby shifted again. As the sky bled gold and crimson, Amaya looked down at the silver bracelet gleaming on her wrist. It had begun as a symbol of transaction. Now it was the mark of transformation. She smiled, whispering as the waves carried her words away. The night that bought a heartbeat became the life that taught us how to love. Epilogue. Dawn spilled gold over Tybee, turning the ocean into a sheet of light. The cottage breathed with the rhythm of waves and a softer sound, tiny feet pattering across the deck. Zuri King, round-cheeked and determined, toddled toward the railing clutching a stuffed sea turtle. "Mama, look! Sun!" she squealed, as if she were the one who'd lit it. Amaya scooped her up, bracelet flashing at her wrist. The same silver circle that once meant survival had become something else entirely, a promise she kept every day without a contract. She kissed Zuri's curls and whispered, "You're the best sunrise we ever got." Inside, the kettle sang and Adrian moved easily through their kitchen, sleeves rolled, dreadlocks tied back. Tybee had gentled him. Power still fit him like a suit, but he wore it looser now. He'd kept his word. He mentored the new CEO from a distance and let go of the throne. The empire hadn't crumbled without his hands on the reins. It had simply learned a kinder way to stand. They ate on the deck, while gulls traced white arcs overhead. Zuri fed crumbs to the breeze and shrieked when the crumbs floated back to her lap. Adrian laughed, then turned to Amaya with that soft, private look that still made her breath catch. "Board call at 10, he said. 15 minutes max, I swear." "You always say 15, Amaya teased. "It's your favorite lie." He grinned, guilty. "Fine." 20, her phone buzzed. A photo arrived from Tasha. A double-hand selfie showing 2 rings and 2 ridiculous grins. Marriage license secured. Ceremony in 6 weeks. Don't be late with my bouquet, Mrs. King. Behind them, Marcus lifted their joined hands like a championship banner. Amaya laughed out loud and texted back a string of exploding hearts. Down on the sand, Ken walked the shoreline in careful, faithful steps. No more tubes, no more beeping alarms, just tide and sky and the bliss of unhurried minutes. Denise walked beside him, carrying a bucket and trash tongs, stooping to gather bottle caps and sunburned plastic. Community service had begun as a sentence and become a choice. Some afternoons, she stayed late at the Hope and Heart office without being asked, showing frightened families how to read medical codes and insurance forms, like road maps instead of riddles. She wasn't redeemed by speeches, she was redeemed by repetition, little daily restorations no camera bothered to film. Across the state in an airless courtroom, the last chapter of Victor Sloan closed with the sure click of a judge's gavel. The confession Amaya had carried like a burning coal had turned to iron. Fraud, intimidation, arson. Headlines flashed, then dimmed. Victor learned what power without people is worth. Not much. Evelyn Harper drifted through the news in thinner print. No splash, only a line about a London gallery internship, and a note that she declined comment. Amaya held the clipping once, surprised to feel nothing sharp in her chest, just an old ache loosening. Some stories don't end with fire, some end with quiet. At 11, the beach filled with folding chairs and a banner fluttering. Hope and Heart Mobile Clinic, free screenings today. Nurses in bright t-shirts, unloaded coolers, blood pressure cuffs, and laughter. A teenager arrived with a fear-stiff mother. A grandfather came because his daughter insisted. From the porch, Amaya watched them like a gardener watching first sprouts. The fund had grown into clinics, partnerships, scholarships for medtechs who looked like the families they served. Every appointment kept was a preempted catastrophe. Every hand held turned a stranger into a neighbor. "Mrs. King?" A woman in a floral head wrap climbed the steps, eyes shiny with relief. "You don't remember me, but last fall, y'all covered my son's surgery. He's in school now." "He runs," she laughed, wiping tears. "He runs so much I'm tired." "Thank you." Amaya clasped her hands. "Tell him to keep running. Tell him to run for me." When the board call inevitably stretched to 28 minutes, Adrian reappeared sheepish, bearing iced tea as tribute. Zuri barreled into his legs, squealing, and he surrendered instantly, hoisting her to his shoulder. They made a picture Amaya once didn't dare imagine. The feared billionaire turned family jungle gym, the girl who'd been sold once upon a night, now standing on ground no one could buy. Afternoon tilted warm and honeyed. Tasha and Marcus arrived ahead of schedule because Tasha didn't believe in on time if she could live at early. She burst through the screen door with a shout and a hug that jostled everyone's ribs. Okay, roll call, vows practice tonight, cake tasting tomorrow. And if one of you shows up without sunscreen, I'm writing you out of the best friend contract. We have a contract? Adrian asked. We have many, Tasha said. All non-negotiable. They ate watermelon on the steps, while Zuri tried to feed slices to the ocean. Ken dozed under an umbrella, hat tipped over his eyes. Denise taught a kid from the clinic how to build a better sand wall. The air smelled like salt and sugar. Someone's speaker played Frankie Beverly. The world, for once, looked exactly like the prayer Amaya used to whisper into sterile ceilings. Make it simple, make it full, make it ours. As the sun melted into the water, Amaya drew her mother's letter from the pocket of her sundress, the paper worn soft from rereading. I hope this place finds you when you're ready, baby. I hope it gives you a way to breathe. It had. It did. She slid the letter back and rested her palm on the soft curve of her belly, though Zuri was no longer inside it. Another hope stirred there anyway, the kind that isn't a person so much as a plan. Another clinic, another scholarship, another promise kept. Tell me the story, Zuri demanded, drowsy now, thumb just shy of her mouth. Which one? Amaya asked. The one where Daddy didn't die, Zuri said, as if it were a fairy tale and not a ledger of terror paid down with love. Amaya drew them close, daughter tucked into one side, husband into the other, and began, voice low and bright as the horizon. Once, there was a night that bought a heartbeat. It was messy and wrong and brave, and from it grew a life that taught us how to love. Loud, honest, and forever. Waves answered like yeses. The bracelet caught the last stripe of sun and threw it back as a ribbon of light across the deck, as if even metal wanted in on the vow. Tomorrow would bring emails, budgets, teething, and flights. Tomorrow would be ordinary, which is to say, holy. But tonight, the ocean kept their secrets and stamped their names into the damp edge of earth. King, 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 a family, written where water meets land, and nothing stays unless it is remade again and again. They stayed until the first star opened its eye. Then they rose together and went inside, leaving the door ajar so the sea could keep singing them to sleep. Here comes the end of the story. If you are interested in Season 2, comment Mr. Hope, Season 2.